Welcome to the Wing Space podcast, a place to take up space, a space for you to settle in, sit back, relax, and focus a little bit on health, wellness, faith, family, and this crazy thing called life.
This podcast is not a replacement for mental health treatment or professional health care. In case of crisis or emergency, please contact your local healthcare provider or dial 911.
Hey there, and welcome to the Wing Space podcast, a place to take up space. We are diving into the topic today about boundaries, and I am excited to have one of our therapists here at Hope and Healing with us today to help me in this conversation. So, Jessica, I'm really excited to have you with us today. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and maybe why this topic of boundaries is important to you?
So, hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Beinert. I am an LMSW with Hope and Healing. And one of the reasons why boundary setting is a topic that interests me is because so many people go through their lives kind of feeling like they're the victim of certain events in their lives. And they don't really learn. They get to an age where they never really learned how to set boundaries in a healthy way. I work with a lot of teens, and I know that the impact of learning these skills is going to have on their adult life. But I also see adults that truly struggle with this because they've spent their entire childhood, their entire adolescence, and even some of their adulthood not setting boundaries with people in their lives or with employers, or not just being that people pleaser gene. And it's something that takes a bit of unlearning. And honestly, it's something that so many of my clients do struggle with because they don't always necessarily feel like they're worthy of setting these boundaries and having that protection against their mental health. And of course, all of them are worthy. And I love to express that to them and teach them about setting boundaries and allow them to have a space where they can come to work through those and process the guilt that comes with setting boundaries at times. So, yeah.
That's good stuff. Good stuff. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Hey, Southern Maryland, are you ready to beat the brain fog and get focused? Join us for Hope and Healing's upcoming wellness workshop, Hocus Focus 2, in collaboration with Essential Blends Aromatherapy. Connect with community members and create your very own aromatherapy products for focus while learning new coping skills for clearing brain fog. On-site childcare will be provided for $5 a child, and pre-registration is required. So sign up today by visiting hopehealingtherapy.com or visiting our link in bio at Hope Healing Therapy Wellness on Instagram.
You know, we might have some listeners who are thinking, what are boundaries? And another thought that I have that we can dig into a little bit is, you know, sometimes I hear people say that other people don't respect my boundaries, but sometimes I like to flip that and say that we let other people violate our boundaries. So maybe it's important to talk a little bit about what are boundaries and how are they different in different contexts of our lives.
Yeah. So boundary setting can be used in all aspects of our lives. It's really anything that you do to clarify the expectations you have of yourself, the expectations you have of others, and instead of just expecting other people to know what you want or what you need or how to make you feel safe or feel comfortable, you are ultimately the number one person who knows what you need, and you are the most self-aware of what it means to make you feel safe and comfortable. So if you're not expressing that to others, you can't just assume and then be angry with them and let resentment build that they're not doing what you expect of them if you're not clarifying that with them, if you're not setting those boundaries with them.
And sometimes I think what happens in conversations with my clients is that they don't even know what their own boundaries are. So how do we articulate that to other people if we don't really know what feels safe and secure for us? So I'm sure in your work with your clients, sometimes what you're doing is helping them to identify and be able to articulate what are my boundaries so that they can then understand them for themselves and then be able to share that with other people for their safety. mental health and physical safety too, but emotional safety tends to be the place where people so frequently violate our boundaries.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's why it's really important before you are setting healthy boundaries, you need to look into yourself. You have to be self-aware. You have to understand what you're comfortable with. What are your non-negotiables? What are you giving up to prioritize other people's needs and wants over your own? One way to keep it really simple with clients is, you have to look at it as, are you saying yes to others, but then saying no to yourself? And if in any situation that it's something that you're saying no to yourself, that's when you have to reevaluate your boundaries with that person or in that situation.
That's so good. And it just reinforces for our listeners who may have just listened to our 2 episodes about focus and attention. I talk about this. For every single thing that we say yes to, we're saying no to at least one other thing. And I love the way that you describe that, because if we say yes to someone else's needs, what of our own needs are we putting aside? What are we sacrificing for ourselves in order to say yes to someone else? That's good. So I'm just curious, when our listeners are thinking about those non-negotiables, what might be some examples of non-negotiable personal boundaries that people might want to consider, especially if they're that person that feels like people just walk all over me and I'm a people pleaser and I just do what everybody else wants me to do? What might be some examples of those non-negotiable boundaries that folks might want to consider?
Well, anything that causes any kind of mental distress, of course, like listening to your body and trusting your own, instincts, your gut. And if you're feeling anxious about a situation, if you're feeling stressed about attending an event, if there's certain people that are going to make you uncomfortable there, listening to how your body is physically reacting can be very intuitive to what you need as a non-negotiable. So attending a meeting where someone has previously talked down to you or been hurtful towards you, or being part of a group or sitting at a table with negative people and taking on that negativity. It's something where you can say, this isn't for me. If it doesn't make me feel good, if I don't feel safe and comfortable in this situation, then I can't hold space for it.
Absolutely. One of the examples that came to my mind were, in the spooky season, Halloween is coming and there's lots of scary movies on TV. And I'll be the first to admit that I do not like scary movies. And I remember a couple years ago, we went to King's Dominion and our kids wanted to do the, Halloween haunt, whatever it's called. And my youngest son and my best friend's daughter were little and they didn't want to be scared. So you could buy those necklaces that light up and it tells the monsters not to scare you. I totally spent $15 for one of those for myself. And my friends and my husband kind of made fun of me, but that was a boundary that I was going to set for myself. As silly as it might sound, I did not want that scary character in my face trying to scare me, because it's not safe for me. It doesn't feel good. It interrupts my sleep and it just doesn't feel good. So I said, this is what I need for myself. And you guys can be scared. You can go over there, whatever you want to do. The same thing is true for movies. The kids want to go see scary movies. I'll take you, but I'm not going to watch it. My husband wants to watch a scary movie on TV. I love that for you. You watch it, you enjoy it. I'm going to go in another room and either watch something else or read or something like that. So it can be something as potentially trivial as what kind of movie you want to watch, to who are the people you're going to allow within your circle and who you're going to interact with, and then how those people are going to treat you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's a big conversation for sure.
Yeah. And one of the things that you kind of are talking about is, what is preventing people from doing that? What right there, just the processes that you had in, am I going to look silly? Maybe I should just push through. A lot of us just push through things, or I have to attend, or should ourselves into something, or it's fine, I'll get through it, or I don't want to be rude. I don't want to hurt other people's feelings. So one of the most important things in setting healthy boundaries is setting healthy boundaries with yourself. So what you expect of yourself it's priority number one. Before you can set healthy boundaries with others, you have to have healthy boundaries with yourself. If you know that something scares you, or if you know that something makes you anxious, then don't do it. Just because it is what other people are doing, don't do it. If it's something like for me, I have an example too. I stopped watching Grey's Anatomy a long time ago because it made me so sad to watch everyone die all the time. And while I know death is an inevitable part of life, I don't want it thrown in my face every single week on Thursday evenings, which so that was something I had to stop. I had to step away. I had to take that out of my life. And even though there were times where people would talk about it on social media and they try to draw me back in, it was a boundary that I had to set with myself. And sometimes those boundaries are people or they're things that you once enjoyed or that once brought joy to your life. But there's a part of the grieving and the guilt that's going to come with no longer having those people or having those things in your life that you are going to miss. But ultimately, you will feel much better and much safer and more comfortable once you have those healthy boundaries in place for you.
Absolutely. And what you and I are talking about is more, I guess, more about how we engage with the world, the shows we're going to watch, the activities we might attend, but it even goes so far as the people that we allow into our emotional space, but also our physical space, not feeling obligated to invite certain people to gatherings or attend certain events because people are going to be there. And you said when we first started talking about listening to your gut, and in the work that we do with survivors of trauma, sometimes we are disconnected. The folks we work with are disconnected from their bodies. And so they don't really know what it feels like when our gut is telling us something. So helping people to, our listeners, just to pay attention to that butterfly, that flip in your stomach, that thing that tells you like, ooh, this is yucky, and giving yourself permission to say, I don't want to go to that event, or I don't want to be around those people, or I don't want to engage in that activity. It's really hard to do. What are some of the benefits of setting boundaries? Why is it so important? I feel like this is one of those topics that we could just talk about all day long, and we could give example after example after example of setting boundaries, but also of not setting boundaries and the consequences of that. So why is it so important? What are some of the benefits that people can experience by setting boundaries?
So yeah, boundary setting it's pretty much one of the highest forms of self-care. It is protecting yourself at all costs, protecting your own mental health. It's one way to practice prioritizing your needs over others and allowing yourself the grace to do that. It can, lead to you finding a more supportive place of employment, a more supportive partner. It can lead to you having friendships that bring joy into your life as opposed to bringing pain into your life. Setting healthy boundaries can ensure that you not only feel that you're surrounded by good, positive, supportive, loving people because you've set those boundaries, because other people who don't support you or don't bring joy into your life, they're going to be the ones that are going to push those boundaries. They're going to be the ones that are going to come back to you over and over again and walk all over your boundaries. And eventually that's when you have to, you have to give them the opportunity to reaffirm those boundaries, but then you also have to say to yourself, is it time to walk away? Because this person is they're not listening to the boundaries that I've set for them and within our relationship. So now is it time to walk away from that person? And what boundaries can do is they can show you, they can be a way for you to determine that. So even if you are someone who has experienced trauma or of any kind, in order for you to be able to kind of further your judgment and to empower yourself and and self-validate what you believe, you can utilize boundary setting as a way to distinguish between the people that are crossing your boundaries and the people that are understanding and accepting of your boundaries, and use that as a way to build up on that confusion and that disconnect that you might have experienced and that you do experience, and build on that to be able to make those decisions with people and to be able to walk away from the wrong people or the wrong places of employment or wrong friendships.
You talked about sometimes the people pleasing gets in the way. We want to just ignore the boundaries. We want to ignore the violations of our boundaries. What are other things that stand in the way of people being able to set those boundaries?
Yeah, so, sometimes it can be hard to distinguish when there are family members or people that you've known for years that that's just the way that they are. Some people will talk you out of your own thought processes, and most of the time we really just want to keep the peace in our lives, right? We want harmony. That's what we all desire: happiness, harmony, peace. And if setting a boundary is causing a conflict, that to us teaches us, okay, well, what can I do to solve this conflict? We all want conflict resolution. Essentially, we fear rejection. We want people to like us. We want people to be happy with us. So what we'll do is we'll talk ourselves into these negative things. And sometimes that is commonly learned behaviors from childhood, where we've learned behaviors, and codependent individuals who learned codependence from the way that they were raised. It's a commonly learned behavior for them to be people pleasers, to allow others' needs to be met over their own. And anyone that has a history of childhood trauma, it's very common to see that codependency and see that prioritization falling there. And that can be one of the barriers to being able to set healthy boundaries, is that you've spent your whole life doing the opposite, and it's a whole unlearning, and it takes so much time and practice. And that's why it's important. Anyone can read a blog and talk about this and hear about this and be like, I'm going to start doing that. But that's why it's really important. The work that we do with clients is going to be there to hold them accountable, going to be there to highlight the consequences of those unhealthy boundaries, and to be able to teach them assertiveness and communication skills, because people are going to push those boundaries no matter what in life. And some of them don't even mean to push the boundaries. Sometimes family can say, oh, you're not going to attend. Well, this could be, grandma's last Christmas or something like that. And it's one of those things where you take on that guilt, and then you go and you show up, and it's terrible, and you're anxious the whole time, and it wasn't what was right for you. But it's even something as simple as the words that people say that, oh, the what ifs that can talk you into doing something that you're not comfortable with.
When you were talking, it made me think of, all of us have probably at some point been on an airplane, and they give us the safety protocol of, put your own oxygen mask on before you help the person or child next to you. And I think that that's so representative of the disconnect in the world that we live in, because so many times we want to give, not only do we want to put somebody else's mask on first, but we want to give them our mask instead of putting our own mask on, making sure it's adjusted properly, and then helping someone else with their mask. We have to make sure that our boundaries are set, that we know where our mask is, we know how to use it, we put it on when we need it, and then we're available to help other people. And unfortunately, we get in those cycles and those relationships with sometimes very well-meaning people, push those boundaries. Sometimes I talk to clients too about the idea of expectations, because we set boundaries, and expectations can sometimes be used interchangeably depending on the context that you're using them. If I have certain expectations of myself or certain expectations of other people, then the boundary might be placed in a different place. And then I feel like I'm disappointed, or I feel like I'm exhausted and run over, but it's really because my expectations were unrealistic and they weren't going to be met because of where I placed them. And as we get into the holiday season, there's going to be many, many more opportunities for families to gather. And there's an expectation that, that we're all going to have the Hallmark movie experience when we go to family events. And that's not always going to happen. So how do we set a boundary so that our expectations are not they're not missed, right? Because I want this event to be amazing. I want to have good conversations. I want to feel safe and secure, but that's not what it's going to be. So my boundary is, I'm going to come for 1 hour. I'll be there for an hour and then we're going to leave. And I'm going to love the time that I'm there with you. But beyond that time, it just leaves opportunities for things to get messy.
And it's interesting, the point you kind of made up about the mask, though. We obviously, through our profession, we are compassionate. So we are the people who want to put masks on other people. We want to help them with theirs. We want to give them our mask. And there are people in this world that are mask takers, and there's plenty of them that want to take your mask, that want to take that from you. And that's why, for the people like you and I that are compassionate, that are the givers of the world, that doesn't mean we should change who we are. We just got to protect ourselves against the people that are going to be mask takers.
That's so good, Jess. That's so good. I have this vision, right, of like a little cartoon interaction where, you know, I go to give somebody my mask knowing that I have like an extra one in my pocket, and, you know, the mask taker like grabs it out of my pocket whilst I'm giving it away. So now I'm left with no mask. And there are people, I'm sure, within our listening community who are caregivers. They're helpers. They're within that community that they want to be the people that are saying, yeah, I'll do it. I'll help. But at what cost does that come? Sometimes, are we left without a mask because maybe we're a little bit too naive to see the mask takers in our lives. And we gave away the last of what we had, thinking we had something in reserve, but then somebody took that from us. And that's really good. That's good.
Mm-hmm. And it takes a lot of resilience as a person to stand up and say what you need. So sometimes we get into relationships and we get to form patterns. We become complacent into our role in the relationship. And one of the things that we can do is we can prioritize other people's needs. And the more that we do that, the more we allow the other individual to feel enabled, to feel like that's what is deserved. That's what they are owed. And that's their expectation now of you. So anytime you try to push back on those expectations that they now have of you, they're thinking, oh, well, you're being mean, or, oh, this is you trying to be in control, and this is, you're hurting me. And it can be, I'm sure, painful for the individual to some degree, where they see someone in a certain light and they have these expectations of them. But if that expectation that they have of you doesn't match your expectation of how you see yourself and your life, then there's going to be a disconnect. And that's a conversation that needs to happen. And having the resiliency to stand up to someone that we care deeply about, and to kind of make them uncomfortable and sit in that uncomfortable conversation, is what is important about setting boundaries. It's not always going to be the most comfortable conversations, but it's important to have the conversation because it allows us to prioritize ourselves and our needs.
Yeah. Yeah. And, sometimes we feel like we have to just say yes because we want to make people happy and we don't want to cause stress and, strife. But really asking ourselves, what are we losing or lacking or giving up? What's our gut telling us about this choice that we're making by giving whatever it is, time, attention, energy to this other person or this other thing? So it takes a lot of self-awareness. So where might somebody start if maybe they're not in a therapeutic relationship yet, so they don't have that relationship to like come into their therapist and say, hey, I listened to this podcast and I really want to work on boundaries with you. But maybe they have a situation or a relationship that they want to be able to explore some boundaries. Maybe they just want to start looking internally. What might be an activity or an exercise that someone might be able to engage in to get that internal dialogue started?
I think it's hard. It's hard for most of us to, those questionnaires that come out. It's like, what do you like? What do you want? What do you need? It's hard for us to even dive into those things because we don't allow ourselves. We think it's selfish, and self-care, as we know, is not selfish. And just focusing from a non-judgmental way, listing maybe some problematic behaviors that you see within yourself, and then turning into that, and looking at it from a place of grace. Like, I know that I have poor time management, right? So that's a problematic behavior that affects me, that affects my mental health, right? So how can I make sure? Well, I can make sure that I'm not helping everyone else out when I should be doing my things during the time that I need to be doing it, because that is really what affects my ability to be on time and to be productive, is that I'm too focused on what other people need instead of what I need to get done. I'm too available to other people. So looking at that and saying, well, what can I do? Okay, I know that that's something that I struggle with. Now what can I do? And deciding that, okay, well, when I have this time's going to be strictly for my work, or this time is going to be when I leave the house. And if you're not with me, you're not with me. And setting those boundaries to set myself up for success is just another example of how we can look inwardly at ourselves, but from a place of, oh, I'm terrible, like I'm always late or I'm always rushing, instead of looking at it in a harsh way, but like looking at it as a way from a loving place, and deciding, okay, these are some things that I could use some work on, and this is how I'm going to try and work on those things, is one way that you can kind of look internally. And that's a great place to start, because then you can kind of notice things that are happening around you. Like, I didn't realize that the reason why I'm always, not going to bed at night is because I don't have enough me time during the day. That's a big one with my mom clients, and is they're not getting enough me time, so they're waiting till the end of the night. Then they're tired the next day. Then they're moody the next day and irritable, and they're not as productive. It's okay. Well, how can I give myself me time that's during normal waking hours, so I'm not staying up to have them? It's setting boundaries as simple as that. As one of your problematic behaviors, looking at a problem that you have in your life and changing it into, okay, well, what can I do to fix this?
Yeah. And starting small. I'm imagining the person you're describing listening to this right now, thinking that they have to go all in, and all in is just an opportunity for complete failure. So starting small, giving yourself grace, knowing that it's not going to be perfect, and just slowly setting those boundaries for yourself, and holding other people accountable for those boundaries. Yeah, good stuff. Any final thoughts for our listeners today about boundaries?
No, I mean, if there's any more that they want to know, it's in the blog on our website. So it goes into details about the different types of boundaries, emotional availability, and a little bit more information on barriers, and just different things that you can do to set yourself up for success with boundary setting.
Yeah. So check out the blog. www.hopehealingtherapy.com is our website. You can check out the blogs there. Would love to hear your thoughts. So feel free to send us a DM, or you can email me, Jennifer@hopehealingtherapy.com. We hope that you found this podcast to be of value to you. Appreciate you taking your time, Jess, to sit and chat with me. And hope everyone has a great day. Thanks so much for listening.